What's up, everybody? We're back for another episode of the Dragzine Podcast. I'm your host, Senior Associate Editor Brian Wagner. Joining me this week is Drag Week Funster Joe Barry. Joe, what's going on?
Not too much. How are you today?
Doing good, doing good. Racing season is first officially in full swing, and I'm loving every second of it.
Yeah, it seems like it's been forever since we've had normalcy with our racing and anything car related, I guess.
Yeah, it's crazy. They opened Ohio back up fully, and I went to the Street Outlaws No Prep Kings event this past weekend, and thankfully they put like higher capacity stands at a National Trail Raceway because they packed that place out. I would say there was easily on Saturday 10,000 people there. It was nuts.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, it was great. Everybody was smiling, having a good time. I mean, it was truly a sight to see, and it kind of gives you that little sparkle of hope that maybe things are going to start getting at least somewhat better, right?
Yes, sir. I completely agree.
And the only thing that sucked was that this fell on the same weekend that, Drag and Drive event here was going on locally, the Midwest Drags, which I really wanted to go to. And if one of my junk piles would have been running, I'd have been participating in, but looks like those guys had some fun on Midwest Drag Week.
Yeah, they had basically the worst that can happen is the rain. It's one thing to rain out at a track and not be able to race for that day. But when you're actually driving the cars from track to track, it really becomes a hazard, for lack of a better word. Because most of us, or even in the faster cars, most everyone's got slicked up cars. And so you end up driving in the moisture.
Yeah, and I giggle anytime someone says, "Oh, it must not be a street car if you can't drive it in the rain on drag radials." And I'm like, tell me you don't have a fast car without telling me you don't have a fast car. Because I know in my car, when that converter would decide to go into full party mode and there's a little bit of moisture on the road on a set of drag radials, life wasn't fun. I couldn't imagine doing that in like Tom Bailey's car.
Yeah, exactly. I have a Mercedes that we raced at a couple drag weeks. My wife races it, and that car's on drag radials. And I can tell you, it's a 500 horsepower car, and in the rain, it's horrible. It's not something you want to drive. So no. It's tough.
Yeah, and I think, again, that's what, in my opinion, the drag and drive stuff I've always been a fan of, but it really shows that in my opinion, it's what puts a stake in the heart of, oh, that's not a street car. Oh, really? These guys drive them in the rain. They drive them, 1,000 miles and they beat on them. Pretty sure it takes a street car to do that because I don't think my race car can do that.
Well, and that's the biggest thing with that is there's a lot of things that we do on the drag and drive events that if I had a nice car, I wouldn't drive my nice car on the routes a lot of times. Between dirt roads, pothole roads, I wouldn't take it. There's no way. Yet I drive the race car or my car, street car, whatever you want to call it, down these roads and beat the heck out of it. So, yeah, there's a compromise. It's not the funnest ride in the world, but it's, at least we're enjoying the cars.
To me, the drag and drive events are like the triathlon of racing events, whereas a triathlon beats on the human body. The drag and drive is the triathlon for the vehicle because it's brutal, but it's fun. That's why people keep doing it.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It's got to be that we pretty much have the cars figured out for most. Things still break, things happen, but we have the cars figured out now. So the drives aren't the killer anymore for the cars. However, for the people driving the cars, it's rough, and every year I think, why in the world am I doing this? Because by the time I'm done, it takes me 2 weeks to recover. It's just hard on you. You don't realize that you sit in that car for 8-10 hours a day driving it down the highway.
Now, you've been racing your stunning 56 Chevy for a long time in the PSCA, then in Drag Week. How did that whole journey begin for you to have this car with this car and, the PSA and, how did it all really begin for you?
Back in the 80s, my dad bought a couple cars, Tri-Fives, and he put them all for sale. He just bought them to resell them. So I ended up with the car more as an opportunity, I guess, than something that I picked per se. My dad would buy cars, bring them back here to Colorado, and resell them. And the 56 that we had, no one wanted. They thought it was an ugly car, just sat in the garage for years. So I ended up with it. Once I had an interest for cars, that happened to be the car I ended up with. And so we raced it like a pro street style car for years. And as things progressed with heads up racing, you start to learn that having a big tire car, that it probably should be fast. And it wasn't fast. It was a 10-second car, big tire car. So it kind of just, wasn't that great. So in the late 90s, beginning 2000s, I had Jerry Bickle build the car that we have now. And we built it to race pro street and MCA. And got the car done, and the car was super heavy. So we ended up running Nostalgia Pro Street, which the way the rules are written in that class, it's very hard to be competitive at there. You want to build a purpose-built car for Nostalgia Pro Street, because I was still too heavy for that class. So at that point, we went and class raced with PSCA because they had a heavy street class, which fit perfect. We were 3620, I think, and the class was 3,600 pound class. So that's kind of how it progressed till mid 2000s, say 2007, 2008. And at that time, we had won a couple championships with the car as a big tire heavy street car, and we were getting third year, I think, and a lot of guys in the class decided to go to NHRA and say, hey, this guy's going faster than 750, because at that time they didn't have a tech, they didn't have a cert for a car like that. And needless to say, that class went away because the cars weren't legal. So the car ended up getting parked because there was nothing to race, because I couldn't cert the car at that weight. And about 2009, 2010, I was reading an article about drag week, and I thought, hey, this sounds pretty cool. Let's try that. And then that was kind of the beginning of the whole addiction to racing, the drive events, the reliability type things.
Yeah, that's I guess what's interesting is, now that you started doing the drag and drive stuff, what's kept you attracted to it? What's made it kind of, like we were talking about, it's a torture test. What makes you keep going back for more?
Now it's all about the people that we go to hang out with. When we first started doing it, it was a whole thing that I felt like we were trying to prove the car was a street car to everyone else. And it took me, I don't know, 3-4 years. I realized I didn't need to prove anything to people, but it's going to be the same old adage. Everyone, well, that's not a street car. Well, to me, anything's a street car if you can drive it. I don't have a car that just goes 20 miles down the road. I mean, a lot of guys make that claim. Oh, it's a street car, I drove 20 miles. No, drive it a couple hundred miles. Then I believe it. But so that was the biggest thing, is I was trying to prove stuff that, I learned I didn't need to prove it anymore. And now it's just, I go and I'll hang out with the people. It's nice to see all the people, because when it started, it was such a small group of people. Now it's huge amount of people. So now we'll go to an event and we don't see any of the original people because it's just become so big.
That's one of I was gonna say, that's one of the things I've heard from a lot of the drag and drive people, is it's like the atmosphere and the individuals like really make it for them. It's like a family reunion each year.
That is very true, because a lot of these people, I mean, we stay in contact with, but a lot of these people, that's the only time we see them is at these events, whether it be a race week event or the Midwest drags. or drag week. That's where you actually get to see these people every year, because it's not like when we were class race where every couple weeks, every month you see the same group of guys or girls, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it a little bit different, more special, is that kind of that camaraderie you have, that you've completed something that's that epic, right?
It is. I mean, and everyone, it's hard to explain it to someone who hasn't done it. And once you've done it, it has a whole different feel for it. You know, that you have a different, I mean, everyone, I think it's fair to say everyone's idea when they first do it is they're worried about how fast the car, how quick the car is. What you learn after you do it the first time is that stuff's important to the event, but it's more important to finish the event. You know, I mean, I went fast and I went slow at the event, but what you remember is not making it to the end of the event. I mean, if you break on the middle of the week or the end of the week, that is the worst thing. I mean, it just ruins it.
Couple of the guys we had on the 10K drag shootout, Adam Hodson and Nick Taylor, do a lot of the drag week stuff. And I remember the last time they were on it, they grenaded a motor, like literally as they were getting ready to pull into one of the final stops. So they pulled the car in and they did a Facebook Live of them R&Ring an engine at the track just so they could make that hit. Wasn't anywhere near fast, but they wanted to complete it. And it was one of the most wild things I've ever seen, is like all these dudes thrash on it. They took another one of the guys' drag week cars to the junkyard to pick up this engine. I mean, it was all hands on deck.
And that kind of stuff to me is the best. I mean, to see the people and the amount of just the energy that goes into it and the excitement. I mean, the guy just blew up the motor and you will see smiles and, you know, everyone thrashing away and enjoying it. I mean, it's work and they're enjoying it.
Now, I've heard this from a few other drag week competitors. When you need to, like, when you're speccing out a build or something, when you go to a manufacturer, let's say you're getting valve springs and you explain to them what you're trying to do they look at you and say, we don't have anything designed to deal with that, you know, or like a dry sump oil system? They're like, are you nuts? Does this require you guys to really think a lot further outside the box than a normal build?
You know, sadly, there's very few vendors out there, I hate to say, that try to learn from what we do. And I've always been puzzled by that, because there's so much R&D that we could provide based on what we put the parts through. My combination is, we dealt with the gentleman that built motors for like race boats, where it's not like just drag racing, but he had an idea of what to do to build the boats, because they've had the harshest issues with over revving, you know, when they come out of the water, different things like that. So that's where we started. So I went to, I basically started to try to build a pro mod motor, and then we kind of worked in adding what the durability from boat racing. And that's how we ended up with what we have today. We ran a lot of parts, which people, now it's more common, but people didn't believe what we ran. They said, there's no way. We've run aluminum rods since the beginning. They said, oh, you can't do that. Well, you can, and we have. And valve springs, the valve spring technology has come so far. I mean, it's rare. Knock on wood, I shouldn't say it. We've never had a broken valve spring. But we know the cycle life. We've learned, okay, we don't go out there with old springs. Never. It's just because it's not worth it trying to fix on the side of the road. And then any of the valve train stuff, it has a cycle life. And if you keep track and you maintenance everything right, you know that cycle life. And so we just switch out, we just replace the components. It's just so much easier than taking the risk. Okay, well, it'll make it one more year or one more race or one more drive, because the possibility of it damaging other things to cause a more catastrophic engine failure is possible.
Cycle life is something I've really started to learn a lot about from my friends that race really fast stuff in pro mod and other heads up classes, because they will literally say these rods are good for 25 passes. They could go to 26, but it might only go to 25 and a half. And at that half point, it might exit the block. And that's what a lot of people don't understand, how important when you are on an extreme level, cycle life really is on parts.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I tried to do it the other way. I tried, okay, we're going to get the most out of this stuff, and getting broke down on the side of the road over the years for something that I should have changed. I had enough. So I will pull perfectly good parts off of it and put new ones on, because I know that it's only a matter of time. And like, you can watch it. It'll, like, if say it's a rocker arm, I mean, it will literally, you'll put a new rocker arm and you may start the car up and it'll be the next rocker arm. It's like perfect timing. And, you know, we've stuck with aluminum rocker arms for years. Everyone says, oh, you got to go to steel. Well, no, we've learned what we can get away with that aluminum rocker arm.
You know, and it's funny you mentioned that. You would think that a lot of these companies would want to get on board with what you guys do, because it's almost like NASCAR level R&D. I've got a friend that's done NASCAR R&D. Like, he works in Yates's valve, like in their shop, and does nothing but valve train stuff. And it never ceases to amaze me how much they beat on stuff to find like that perfect combination. And what you guys do is, like you said, it's not necessarily maybe the track use on it, but it's that driving to and from that these parts aren't designed for.
And that's correct. And we've tried. I mean, we have a lot of really good people on board with us, and we always offer, hey, do you want to look at these parts? Some do, most don't. But to me, I would think you would learn. I'm not in the racing industry as far as my business goes, but I like to know why stuff fails, you know, and can you make it better, you know, so it'll last longer. But that's my opinion, obviously, you know, but I would think you'd want to do everything you could to make that part the best you can. We, years ago, we had problems because we run a 16-volt system with fans. And so we would eat fans. I don't know, you'd go an hour and it would burn up a fan. So what we started doing for years is we would throw a 12-volt battery on the floor inside the car and carry a voltmeter, and we would hook up that fan to the battery sitting on the floor. And it would you'd go about 300 miles on a 12-volt battery running a fan. And so we did that for years. And then we had a company, GC Cooling, come on board, and they made a 16-volt fan. And we put that on there, and it's resolved the issue. My passenger doesn't have to have his legs straddling a battery in the front seat. But they actually took what we were doing and applied it and made a motor that would live. So there's possibilities out there.
What's one of the more gnarly things that you've broken on the road? Like, where you've broken it, you've like, I'm not mad, I'm impressed, like, kind of deal.
You know, I'm trying to think. We have a pretty good program. I mean, we started with a Lenco, a CS1 Lenco, which is pretty much unbreakable. And we switched to CS2 because it was a 5-speed. And what happened, or what we learned, is my driving style sucks when it comes to driving, because if you pedal on the CS2, and I pedaled on the CS1, but it would never break it. They're just durable. CS2, every time I pedal it, it could be a burnout. And if I just, jacked with the throttle a little bit, it would roll sprag every time. And those were probably the worst things that we ever broke as far as components. I mean, we'll lose lifters and things like that on the road, but that's all fixable. We've got so good at it, it's easy to fix. Because we know we have exactly the same part. Anything that fails valve train wise, or parts that have other parts. I don't want to keep blaming valve train because we have a really good supplier for our valve train, but we know exactly what we need, and we can identify it almost instantly before we even pull valve covers or assess the situation. So that stuff it's become something we just can do on the side of the road and move on and not really give much thought to it.
I couldn't imagine doing valve train work on the side of the road. Like, it sucks doing it at the shop and at home, but as cars are speeding by at the dark in the dark, that's pretty mental.
Well, a couple of years ago, we were in the Carolinas. I don't know, North Carolina, South Carolina, and we had a rocker arm at break, and they have no shoulders hardly at all. So I park on the shoulder. Of course, it's the driver's side that it broke the rocker arm, and we're trying to do it, and everything's super hot. So we'll do it as long as your fingers can hold it and you stop. Well, we had a truck, service truck, and I don't remember if it was Cat or who it was. They pulled up and they parked kind of in the lane to block, because I'm literally standing in the lane and the cars never move over. They don't move over, and I'm out there. I mean, we can get it done in probably an hour, depending on how quickly it cools. But the cars, it's sketchy out there. Or if you're laying under the car and your feet are hanging out there, you're just waiting to get run over, because that's happened where years ago we used to have vapor locking problems. So shut off the car, we'd run a gear pump and it'd vapor lock. So you'd have to get under there, crack the line, and half your body's sitting out there in the middle of the road while you're trying to do this. So I would say the traffic stuff, or the cars going by, is more sketchy than repairing the car.
That is one of those things, again, that I never, I'm thinking, man, it's got to have to suck to fix this stuff. Never even dawned on me the fact, the speeding vehicles around you in the dark at all.
Well, and I thought about this. I'll tell you, probably over talking here, but we're in Ohio, coming from Bowling Green, Kentucky to Indianapolis. And we come across one of the bridges, real rough bridges, and we lost the fan, I think. Well, we ended up in the process of trying to fix the fan. All my wires run through the chassis. So they're in a bundle through the chassis, which is awesome because they're protected. Well, if you short one and it's in the bundle with the rest of the wires, it melts everything.
Oh.
We shorted one. We melted all the wiring from the front to the back of the car. And so we're on the side of the road in Ohio. It was a giant bridge. We just got off this bridge on Projects on the shoulder of the road, rewiring the car. And I bet we were there 5 or 6 hours. And obviously we didn't rewire it great, but we were trying to get going. And I remember cops pulling up there, and I mean, the car's literally on Projects, front ends off, in front of the car. We're wiring the car. And I'm thinking, this is just, I can't believe we're doing this. And the cops said, we got to go. And I said, I got to get the car wired. I can't go anywhere. And I wish we had pictures from that, because it was quite the sight to see the car on the interstate wiring it.
I got to imagine, the cops pulling up, and he says, I've got to stop the vehicle, calls it back in. And then they ask for the after action report. And he's going to say, you won't believe what I just saw. There's got to be a lot of those stories out there for all kinds of different people that have seen the carnage that track and drive events provide.
Yeah, and I mean, we've been fortunate. I think we've got pulled over one time over the years. Years ago, we had problems charging. So when we were driving down the road on these back roads, I would turn off all the taillights of the car in the trailer because I didn't need them. And we just run on headlights. Well, we're somewhere in some cornfield, and a police officer saw us, and he pulled us over and says, hey, your lights aren't working. I says, well, go check now. And so I flipped the switch on. He goes, you're good. He goes, maybe I missed something. I thought, well,
yeah.
no.
Yeah, you missed something, buddy. You missed something.
that was one of the things. I know it's, but most everyone's, been good. Obviously, if we've been at certain areas where other things are going on, where people might be racing on the street, and the cops show up, and I'm too old to run. So I'm going to sit there and take whatever I get. And I've had them walk up to the car, and the car will be sitting there, wheelie bars and parachutes on it, and they know what's going on. And usually they'll just shake their head and say, get out of there, for the most part. But
Well, before we move to our next section of the interview, I've got to hit our first sponsor here, Procharger. For 25 years, Procharger has been the industry leading aftermarket supercharger manufacturer by designing, engineering, and building the most powerful, reliable, and advanced centrifugal superchargers on the market. No matter if you're looking for a 3,500 horsepower record-setting Pro Mod or a DIY system for your street car, truck, or even motorcycle, Procharger has a perfect supercharger system for you. For more information on the ways that you can add tons of horsepower to your car, visit procharger.com. Speaking of power adders, you're a turbo guy with your car. Have you always been a turbo guy with your stuff, or have you ever wanted to dabble in different things? How's that been for you?
no, I mean, when we started, it was a nitrous car. We always had nitrous. Nostalgia Pro Street was a nitrous with the limited jet size. PSCA was just unlimited. And even after all these years with the turbo stuff, I can tell you the nitrous car was by far more fun to drive. It's a different feeling. I couldn't explain it. I mean, it was never as fast as the turbo car, but the car was more fun to drive ultimately. But for reliability reasons, it's just not sensible for us to do it.
That's what I was thinking, because nitrous cars, my street car was a nitrous car, and there's nothing quite like it. It's hard to explain the kick to the back of a nitrous car trying to pound everything impossible the first 60 feet, right?
Yeah. And when you start stacking systems, it's amazing. You can still feel it as, the timers start coming on. And just like that, if you pedal one of those cars down track and those systems come on again, it's almost the sensation of like the starting line.
Yeah. And like I said, the downside is that if you want to have a competitive nitrous car, it is not going to be nearly as street friendly for a lot of different reasons. And I think that's why you see a lot of the really fast cars that they're turbo cars, because you can they're a lot easier on parts for the street driving portion.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like if we go to a racetrack to race, we're bored. I mean, you make a pass, half the time we don't pull the hood off the car unless there's something, a noise or something. The hood don't come off. When we race nitrous, the first thing you do is pull the hood, pull the plugs, look at the plugs. That was instrumental. I mean, it was every pass. Now we leave plugs in for however long. I mean, you don't even give it a second thought. It's just, it changes your whole outlook. It spoils you because you don't have to work on the car.
Yeah, I have seen nitrous guys tear engines down to bare blocks and have to go through NMCA events, and they're doing crazy things to make the next round of racing the next day. A fresh rack to them is almost routine maintenance at times, and I couldn't imagine putting a fresh rack in during drag week. It could be done, but it probably would not be fun.
No, we take exactly what we're willing to work on. I don't take pistons. I don't take anything like that. My buddy Tom Bailey, he'll put pistons in. He'll do whatever. I'm not going to work that hard. There's just no way. But, teach his own. But we only take what we're willing to work on.
Him and Steve are crazy. Legit, like those guys. I mean, they I was seeing pictures from the Midwest Drags this, during the event. They're doing routine maintenance. They got heads off. They're putting valve springs on stuff. I'm like, you guys are dedicated.
Oh, no, it's amazing. I went with them. I actually drove a rental car in 2019 and I went out there with Tom just to hang out. And I'm sitting there just watching because I had nothing better to do. And I thought, I cannot, because as a racer, you don't see what they're doing. But when I'm just sitting there enjoying the event, I'm sitting there and I thought, you got to be kidding me. I mean, literally had the cylinder heads out. I mean, they were doing something, I don't know, a valve job or something. I'm thinking, what are you guys doing? But no, that's a little beyond what I'm going to do. It's just, it's a little much.
Yeah. I've seen heads up guys that, they're doing their routine maintenance on like a blower combo, and, they're at the track, basically rebuilding the engine, and we're just doing a little bit of maintenance. I'm like, that looks like a complete engine job that you guys are doing. Maintenance to me is, "Oh, let's do some valve lash, let's change the plugs, not let's crack open the bottom end kit."
Well, and that was the thing when we ran nitrous, we would put pistons in it. I mean, that was pretty common when we raced PSCA to put pistons in it. The problem is doing it at the track, there was always something that lacked where it created more problems down the road. Where, I mean, because you're putting something together that really needed a professional's attention or possibly a machine shop, and we're throwing a new piston in there and rings, and oh, it's good. And yes, the motors were big, they made power. You didn't notice a whole big difference, but you were still taken away from the engine, basically.
Yeah, I've seen some racers do some interesting on the spot non-professional machine work where I'm like, yeah, I mean, if you're gonna make the next round, that's cool, but boy, that is definitely kind of rough around the edges.
Well, and the bad part is, when you're doing it, that it's probably going to cost you more in the long run. Yet you still do it because you want to get to that next round or go get to the final, whatever it might be. I mean, because I would do a lot more stuff when we were going to a final than I would obviously in the earlier rounds, because I don't know, you want to win. The bottom line.
Yeah, that I think is part of the sickness that we have in racers, is that we don't have that balance, you know what I'm saying? Where it's like, I probably shouldn't do this, but I want to make it to the next round. So, oh, you tell yourself, it'll be fine. It'll be fine until it's not fine.
Exactly. And then if it works, you sometimes leave it. We in Nebraska a couple of years ago, I lost a lifter, and so we pulled the lifter out. You can see the lifter ate the cam, or ate into the cam. Put another lifter in it. Car ran fine. So 3-4 months later, the cam was still in there, the lifter was still in there, and it wasn't acting up. So figured we'd keep on racing it.
You forget about it until you pull out the cam and you're like, oh, I remember that.
Exactly. And I still have the cam. I keep saying, well, I should probably send that in just in case. But it didn't give me any fits. They said, oh, you can't do that. It'll wear through the hardened material. No, it did just fine.
Now, everybody that has done Drag Week has stories about things that happen on their magical journey. And this is your chance to kind of do some story time about some of the crazy stuff that maybe not only you've done or seen on Drag Week. And let's start with, I'll throw out some topics or some ideas so you can pick through this, because I've had guys tell me some stuff where I have like jaw on the floor kind of deal. Let's talk about some of these at the track repairs. What have you had to do, or what have you seen people do at the track, whether it's a interesting use of tools, lubricants, welding, parts? What's some stuff you've sat back and been like, all right, that's kind of wild.
Well, and what's bad is we get stuck in impound, so we don't necessarily get to see a lot of the stuff that goes on. I can tell you, we blew up the car in Memphis one year. So we had it hauled to the next track. There was a guy with a semi and hauled the car back. And I was depressed, it was the last day. So I didn't even go in to the race early, got there, and I get there, and my wheelie bars are disassembled on my trailer we pull behind a helm. Why? They were intact. That isn't what was affected. And Steve Morris comes over. He goes, we needed some parts for Tom's car. We just seen your parts there, so we decided to use them. Said, okay, well, good enough, And so that was something that we ran across over the years. Transmission stuff. We were just talking. Joe O from Hyperactive had stopped over here last night, and he went with me on the first year, and he had drove the car and actually spun my car out, driving it one night in the rain. And we we were talking because after that happened, it made the hitch loose or something. Well, the trailer fell off going in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So we're able to wire the bumper just long enough, and we dropped the U-Haul at a church, and we left the U-Haul sitting in this church parking lot, threw everything out of the trailer into my car so we could continue driving to the next track. And what was rough is earlier that day, before the trailer fell off, we'd ate a turbo. So now we have this broken turbo on the car that we have to leave on there because we can't change the piping. So we lose the trailer, and then we're driving with the bad turbo to the next track. So once we get there, we have almost everything in the car you could have that was in the trailer. And then we had to put a turbo on the car. And so you end up borrowing stuff from people, whoever you can borrow stuff from, because you don't have the equipment or the tools to make it work.
Again, that's, I could only picture Steve and Tom wandering around the pits going, man, we need something to fix this. Oh, hey, look, that car's on a rollback. Let's get some wheelie bar parts. Like, I could just see that conversation transpiring.
Well, yeah, and when I got there, I don't remember, this was a problem. And I thought, why would the wheels be gone? But what had happened during that, they had hauled it in one of these, it was a semi, and he was hauling 3 drag week cars that were broken. Well, they had a blowout on the way down the Bowling Green, and the awning had fell off the side of the wall and hit the side of my car, which scratched up the car. But you can't be upset because someone's taking care of you. I mean, they're hauling your car and all your junk, at least back to your trailer. So it was a whole issue. There was so much going on at that event that because we had dropped the valve and it went through the turbo, and everyone's standing around there, oh, we can fix it. Thinking, what are you going to fix?
Yeah.
The turbo's destroyed because the valve went through it. I mean, there's holes in the pistons, the head's damaged, but we're going to fix it. And we took it apart. We really, at some point, we originally thought we could fix it, but we didn't.
Is there that kind of energy you'll have on a drag week event, or you've seen other people get it, where it's like you're willing to take on monumental tasks that go beyond common sense and what you should do, and you're just like, oh, we're gonna do this, and you just try no matter what the odds technically are?
Oh yeah, most definitely. I mean, and it's constant because it's truly a mind thing. If you let it get in your mind, you aren't going to succeed at it. So I mean, you figure it out, and where it really gets to you is like you're out in the middle of nowhere. I've got lost a couple times, 40 miles off the beaten path. So you see no other people, no other racers, no other drag week with a broken car, and you're thinking, I don't even know where I'm at. And you're troubleshooting a car in the pitch black, trying to figure out what's wrong with it. And over the years, it's amazing what you learn in those quiet times, or what you're willing to do to get that car running, and to figure it out, to be able to compete.
You just said something that made me think of another question to ask. What are some situations you've run into with we'll call them civilians that don't know anything about drag week, where do you get a lot of questions? What's it like interacting with the general public on one of these deals?
The very first year, there was a gentleman that I don't even know where we were out on the way to Great Man, and we broke down in a parking lot, and it was something simple tool wise that we needed, and we didn't have it. And this gentleman pulled in, and he said, I have tools at home for you. I'll go get them. And he comes back, and he brought me back tools. And it was probably tools from the 40s and 50s. And it got really late, and he was an older gentleman. He goes, well, I got to go. He goes, good luck. And we're telling him, we'll wait, we'll give you your tools back. He goes, no, I think you guys need them more than I do. And I'm thinking, these are, you don't give away your tools. I mean, you don't sell your tools. But these tools, I mean, probably from the 50s. And we still have them sitting in the toolbox all these years later. And we carry them actually because the one time we didn't carry the tools. And so it was neat. After that, over the years, as the events got more popular and Hot Rod like releases the routes and stuff, you get a lot of people at the checkpoints or along the routes. So we'll get a group of people, and I'll take pictures of them. We'll post them, on social media. We try to interact with the people, and they love it because they don't expect you to do that. And it's amazing the crowds that follow these events now. I mean, in the small towns, I mean, you'll be driving down the road and there'll be people, in little farmhouse, they'll have a big sign out, we have beer, or hey, we'll cook you food, for the people driving by, and you're out there in the middle of nowhere, but the people really get into it. It's really cool, actually.
So that's like the equivalent of like the Baja 1000 or something like that the people like are randomly in the desert. Here you are during drag week and there's random people like, here's some bacon and a beer to help keep you going, man.
And it's awesome, And when it first started happening, I think we all were kind of leery, thinking, do you really just stop it, But as times went on, it's kind of, you get accustomed to it and you think, hey, this is all right. Especially if you need a garage, if you need to work on something on a car, I mean, it's awesome. And I mean, people go out of their way to help, and you can obviously, they can only help so much because you don't want to get disqualified, but there's nothing to say they can't provide you a shop, equipment, whatever. As long as you can drive it in there, you're legal.
I have seen some I like the wild posts that you see on social media during these events where people need parts and then they find the parts like crazy. Like, I need this specific rocker arm for this specific combination. And someone like 100 miles away will be like, oh, I got that. I'll meet you. And then they bring you the parts. To me, I think that speaks volumes about our racing community and how we are willing to help each other.
Absolutely. I mean, we've been very fortunate that we haven't needed a lot of parts. Years ago, we broke down on the way to Louisiana from Ennis, Texas. And I posted, hey, does anyone have a trailer? Can they come and get my car? Because we're in the middle of nowhere. And ironically, Chad from Bang Shift, he says, hey, my dad will help you out. Okay, cool. Well, his dad brought me down, brand new truck, brand new trailer. Here you guys go. And I thought, you gotta be kidding me. He says, just take it back to Oklahoma. We'll pick it up in the next couple of days. Okay. So we loaded my car up, hooked my little trailer up to the back, and drove back to Oklahoma. And then they came and got it on the weekend. But I mean, it's unheard of. I couldn't believe he did it. I thought, you got to be kidding me. You're going to drive all this way to get me and then leave me your truck and trailer. And, so it's nice. It's amazing what people do.
Could you imagine that if it was just like, you're in the dark in the middle of nowhere and appears a wild Chad Reynolds to help you, goatee, cackling laugh? I mean, that might terrify. I love Chad, but if you don't know Chad, you'd be like, is this dude going to murder me and eat me? What's going on here?
That is so true. And his dad is a polar opposite of him,
yes.
Because I hadn't met his dad yet, and so I didn't know what to expect, to be honest. And his dad was awesome. I was so thankful. But yeah, totally different than Chad. I helped Chad last year with a fuel pump issue. And I'm thinking, what am I getting myself into? Because just knowing Chad.
There are few absolutes in life. You can't avoid death and taxes, and you cannot have a bad time when you're around Chad Reynolds. That's like a universal law with that dude.
Very true. Very true.
He helped get me into this business through Bang Shift. Thank him for that. And Brian allowing me to kind of freelance and learn for them at one point. And I've dealt with him with, the Horsepower Wars 10K drag shootout. And people don't understand with Chad, he's one of those people, we can only show you a small slice of the insanity that he provides. Like, that's the way it is. The outtakes are funnier than some of the real takes.
Yeah, I would say yes. Absolutely.
And again, it kind of ties back to that culture, these people, these characters. What are some of the, maybe we'll call them the unsung hero characters that you've met on Drag Week, people you might not necessarily have, really like hung out with, but, maybe the cars and the people that you've been going through tech going, all right, that looks kind of wild, combos, people, what have you seen?
Well, the Australians and the Swedens, they always they're a great time. You had Harry Hall from Australia. He built the Chevelle with the turbos out the hood. That guy will say anything. I mean, there is zero filter with him, and he is just a good time. I mean, he no matter what, great guy. The Swedish guys I met years ago, they would come and watch the event before they brought cars here, and so they would rent a couple Suburbans and they would follow along and hang out. And we were privileged that they hung out with us a couple times. And over the years, I remember racing down the highway in their Suburban with them, and them getting pulled over by the police, me keep going. And of course, they live out of the country, so the ticket was big enough that they had to come back to the States for the tickets. And we made a friendship with the gentlemen. And so we started we'd fly the Swedish flag on my car. And those guys, you would think you gave them $1 million. They were just like jumping up and down. They couldn't believe we would do it. But, they came and supported, us here. I mean, so excited. They just wanted to be part of the event. And then obviously they started bringing cars here that were incredible cars. And those guys, out of everyone, they're probably the most diehard guys to complete an event that out of any of us, and maybe it's because they come, takes them 2 days to get here and, months to ship a car and things like that. But they have no give up in them. I mean, they will work until they can't. It's just amazing.
European drag racing fans are on a different level. At one of Donald Long's races, I was in the staging lanes and I was doing live work I was doing, the live interviews for Speed Video at the time. And I'm just bebopping, doing my deal. And I'm going to use the word cornered by these two German guys that their English was about on par, but that you could tell that they didn't know how to say certain things. They scared me. And it turns out they watched and listened to the podcast. And I thought I was about to get into a fight because they were very German in how they spoke. And I'm like, all right, I have to defend myself. They were having the best time on earth. They wanted to take selfies with me because they thought I was famous. I'm like, guys, I'm just some knucklehead that they let talk. And they're like, we love the show. I'm like, awesome. Like, I didn't know how to deal with it, but they were there having the time of their lives, drinking in every ounce of American racing that they could.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's amazing because we're pretty fortunate here. I mean, we can pretty much go anywhere and have racing week in, wing out for most of the part. But so when they come here, I don't believe they have that kind of culture where they live. So they totally appreciate it like we all should, actually. I mean, because you can tell. I mean, and they have fun. I mean, they are so happy to be able to be part of it, even as a spectator. I mean, it's amazing to watch them.
The crazy thing about the Swedish guys is like their version of Street Outlaws, like that's crazy. Like
yes.
They block off the freeway to make hits. And you see these pictures and memes and stuff like that. I've done some stories with these guys. Like they'll send me the videos. I'm like, you guys are hardcore. Like you are stopping traffic on like I-95 here in the States to make a hit on a road that is, you have not scouted. It's bumpy and it curves, and you're taking a big tire car, making that hit. Y'all on a different level.
No. And they live it. They totally live the racing, in every aspect of it. So no, I know the video. It is cool.
Before we kind of hit our last couple questions here, I got to talk about Moser Engineering. And they've been racing across 5 decades through 3 generations of their family because it's a family-owned company. They've been supporting sportsman ranks racers since the beginning of with their lightning fast 2-day turnaround time. They make everything from axles to rear end, suspension, brakes, all in the USA with one goal in mind, so you can win. If you want to learn more, check out moserengineering.com. Another great sponsor, because I use their products in both of my vehicles, and I can attest that a Moser product can take a beating, because by God, we beat on those parts and they survive everything we put them through, which is awesome. Speaking of which, drag and drive events, man, where do you see them going to? Are they going to evolve anymore, or is it like the kind of creature that really like can't evolve, that it, just it is what it is?
I think it's just going to get bigger and bigger, only from the standpoint with today's technology, the cars, it's become easier to do. I don't want to say it's easy by any means, but it's easier to do than when we started. There's a lot of stuff that we learned along the way that obviously, as everyone learns and you pass the information on, it makes it easier. I mean, a lot of the stuff I learned, I had help from guys that had done it prior to me. And so it just keeps getting built on top of that. And then with the vendors, the technology, I mean, it's definitely something that I think is going to get bigger. I think it's more in the mid-range. And I say this and people probably laugh, but probably a high 7-second car to 9-second car. I imagine that's going to explode. We don't have cars. I mean, for like the Unlimited or the Ultimate Iron cars, I mean, even in the Pro Street cars, it's the same group of guys that it's been for the last 10 years. I mean, in Unlimited, it's all the same. Ultimate Iron, we're all the same guys. There's no one, if they're building cars, they either just aren't coming or they just don't do it. But so it's the same. I mean, there's probably 10 of us in those two classes, and it's the same 10 that we don't really see any new cars. You'll see a lot of promotion. Oh, we're building a new car and it's going to run that. But the cars never seem to come out. But I think the middle of the pack type classes, I think that's just going to get bigger. I think it's going to explode. I mean, I think that's where you're going to see the majority of people racing.
I'll back that up, and I believe in that too, because I think what you see is it's easier to make a certain level of horsepower now than, imagine if you took a brand new Z06 Corvette and you teleported it back to 1985 or a Z01 Camaro, a Hellcat, and it laid down the times it did now as a factory car to back then, it would have blown people's minds. It would have been top of the heap. And now, like, a 9-second street car is, I'm not going to say the norm, but it's achievable for your average man.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I always tell people. Everyone says, well, you're fast. No, the problem is it's become, people look at these cars and they think that's the norm. It's really not the norm. I mean, a 12-second car is fast. I mean, if you say it's not, then I don't know what to tell you, but a 12-second car is fast. A 10-second car is super fast. What we've developed with these cars is not the norm. Yes, they go fast, but that's not, typical, and the bad part is that I think it discourages people because they think, oh, well, if I can't build a 8-second car or 9-second car, I just may as well not do it. And that's not, that's not the case. It's just, that's the only bad part I see with the technology and how easy it is to make power, how fast cars have come, is it's kind of ruined it because people look at it like that's where they have to be. And that's not where they have to be. Get out there and enjoy the cars for what it is, and if you get there someday, great.
I think that a lot of people also seem to forget that there's a difference between an 8-second car and a reliable 8-second street car, because anybody can make that hero pass, but you are just that very edge if you didn't build it right, from being an 8-second car to being a long downtime at the track because you did some high energy disassembly.
No, absolutely. I mean, and that's the truth of it. I mean, me and Tom Bailey, we constantly go back and forth, because everything he does is to the max level. It's balls out no matter what. Where we go to a race, I'm very conservative. Everyone knows it. I mean, Tom will bust my chops constantly. Well, you're conservative. He goes, the car will go faster. I said, yeah. I said, but I don't want to work on it. He says, well, you're just letting people win. I said, no. I said, I do not want to work on it. I know how fast I can go and not have to do anything to it and not take the risk. And not him. I mean, and we laugh. I'll make fun of him. I mean, and I can get away with it because we've become friends. But he'll go and he will literally hang the rods out just to make the pass he has intention. And it doesn't bother him. I'm saying, why you could have tuned it back a little bit and went and enjoyed it. Nope. He goes, then I'm just doing like you. Well, yeah, I guess. But I'm always more conservative when it comes to it, because I want it to live. I don't want to destroy it.
No, the turbo street car that we're building, my project car, is on kill. We should make well over 1,000 horsepower. My tuner, good friend Scott Cordell, is helping the car. Are we going to have that thing set on kill all the time? Absolutely not. We're going to take about 200 horsepower out of that thing, so we do not have to work on it all the time. Because the car's going to get driven. You don't want to work on something you drive all the time. Now, when we go to a big event, and if the other thing is, if the track's there and can hold it, yeah, we'll turn the dial up. But what's the point to going out and blowing your stuff up when you can't get the most out of it?
No, and absolutely. I mean, it's definitely something. I mean, and eventually, once you've driven the car long enough, you can find out where that window is how much you can truly put to it, and it still be reliable.
And to me, honestly, what impresses me the most is, like a fast 9, 8-second, 7-second street car is impressive, but one that can do it where it is not like hanging its tongue out, where it's like effortless, where it could be a second or a half second faster, but they've got it tuned in where it will just do it lap after lap after lap, and they'll look at you, want me to do it more? I can do it all day. That's impressive to me.
And what we've done is, when I started doing this the first 2-3 years, we all had, and then I shouldn't say, I think we all still have the same big egos, but you would see unlimited cars like what we have making 5-6 hits. I mean, heck, I've seen us race all the way till 5 o'clock trying to outdo the guy next to you. What's happened since then is we don't do that. Now it's one run and it's done. We got the cars figured out enough, so we go out there, we make that pass, and you got to be willing to accept whatever that is. Hopefully it's a decent pass, and you move on. So, I mean, we literally make one pass, we load up, and we go on. And we've got the cars like my car. It'll go 7.0, 200 something every pass, and I'm done. I mean, there's no reason that, the car will go 680s, but why put it there if I can just be done and get on the road?
Yeah, you need that extra margin for error in case, God knows what happens on the drive. You don't want to be out there at 2 a.m. trying to fix something, whereas maybe you're only having to fix it at, 1 p.m. There's a huge difference there. Huge difference, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've drove by, once again, Tom, I drove by him in the early years, and he'd have his canopy and all the lights up on the side of the road at 4 a.m. They're putting a camshaft in something. And I just drive by and I'm thinking, what are they doing? And then you ask them next one, oh, we had to put a cam in it. Oh, I just put a cam in, right?
Drive by, honk, wave. Hi, guys. I'm going to Denny's to get dinner. You need me to bring you anything?
That's exactly it.
Oh, yeah. And again, I'm just thinking in my mind, like, I like working on a race car more than my street car, because my street car it's a street car. Things are there that don't make it go faster or stop better. There's all kinds of stuff there. I will say that working on a race car while doing major surgery isn't fun. It's a lot easier, but that doesn't mean that you want to be doing that kind of stuff at 2 a.m. on the side of the road.
No, absolutely not. Because it never breaks in a convenient spot. It never breaks. So you're stuck with your surroundings, wherever that might be. on the highway, on a on ramp, off ramp. I mean, it's just where it happens to be.
Yeah, and again, I think that that's what, to me, makes the drag and drive events so interesting and wild. Is the guys that compete in these or have done it multiple times. They live the phrase "embrace the suck" because they are willing to do what most normal guys would pack up and go home. Because I know a few guys that I've raced with, a few guys that are like that. They have the parts that they don't want to work on their stuff. Could they fix it to the track? Absolutely. But you know what? They don't want to do it on a Saturday night. I'll miss this round of bracket racing. Let's just put it back in the box and go home. And then there's idiots like us that are hardcore racers that we're laying on our backs at 2 o'clock in the morning, R and something, because we want to make that hit at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yep. No, and absolutely. I mean, and we did that for years, class racing, because that's what you did. I mean, it didn't matter if you worked all night, putting pistons in it, transmission in it, whatever it took, and you did it so you were ready that next morning. I mean, for whatever reason, you just didn't want to quit.
Yeah.
You know that. And then with the drag and drive events, when you're 500, 600 miles from your trailer in the middle of nowhere, a couple of things come to mind. You don't want to pay the tow bill, obviously, you know, and how are you going to get back there? You know, are you in a town that has a rental car company where you can at least get a rental car to get back? I mean, there's a lot more. So sometimes you want to work on it, and sometimes you have to work on it so you can get back.
Yeah, it's it's a forced requirement that you really weren't counting on. I've seen a few times where boosted cars have become NA cars to make that trip because it's like, I don't have any other options here. Or I've seen people that have had a boosted part fail where they have paid for next day shipping to get it shipped to the next track, and lo and behold, they're hanging a turbo first thing in the morning.
Yep. No, we've done that. I mean, we've 8 turbos and we'll overnight a turbo, and it'll be at the next track, and you swap it out when you get there.
To me, though, it's not that I like to take pleasure in other people's misery, but the cool thing is you see the guys working on the stuff in a hotel parking lot. And to me, that reminds me of like the old school days when you'd see the drag racers, like you'd see a nitro funny car getting tore down in a hotel parking lot. You don't get to see that anymore. But I think that's like kind of, again, what the drag and drive events embraces, like that old mentality.
Oh, absolutely. You 100%. We actually have a buddy of ours that lives here, has an old, I don't know, 55, 56 Pontiac LS base. And he blew that up in Kearney, Nebraska. They went to a junkyard, found another LS base motor, had the junkyard bring it to the track, put that motor in, pulled the one out, broke, put that one in, and went out there and made passes, kept his week average. And I'm just sitting there in amazement. I think, I could not believe you guys pulled that off, let alone, and the car went out there and ran just almost spot on.
And again, it's even more amazing when you're looking at some of these combos that guys are running, that they're repairing this stuff. Like, I know that they're on the Midwest Drags one year, they had like it was basically like a top fuel nitro burning engine kind of deal in a hot rod that, they drive it around on regular gas, but they get the track and run it on nitro. I'm like, that takes some guts. And now Tom Bailey's doing it with that thing that he's making with a nitro engine with a screw blower, which is like, I did an article about blowers a few years ago, was talking to one of the guys about that. They're like, could you imagine running a nitro engine with a screw blower? And then that quote was in my mind. I saw what Tom was doing. I'm like, now we got someone that's doing it.
Well, and it's a straight axle car. Can you imagine being the guy behind the wheel? Because who knows how it's going to handle. I mean, no one's doing it. So you're going to be the R&D for that. You're going to find out, yeah, it worked, or gosh, we need to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, I don't want to be the test pilot on that one where it's like, you get the last little just let go of the button and it feels weird, try to stay out of it. What's it going to do? I don't know. Go find out. No, thanks.
No. And Tom's a good one for that, because he will drive the hell out of the car, without a doubt.
Yeah, Tom definitely is a racer's racer. And like a straight axle gasser style is cool too because I love gassers. I love watching them for the simple fact that anytime there's a nostalgia show, they are legit unpredictable. They're a full step below a fuel altered, but they're in the same like kind of like air, they're in the same ballpark, but not as intense. But they still, they do some wild stuff.
Oh, absolutely. It's like the old alcohol funny cars. Those cars were always, I mean, you think they're just like a nitro car, but they don't appear to handle as well. They literally drive those cars. That's always one of the best things I would enjoy watching is the alcohol funny cars because those cars were all over the place. And it was exciting to watch.
Even the modern ones, those guys and gals, they got to be knuckled up on that wheel because they don't have nearly. If you look at a lot of people, oh, a funny car is a funny car. I'm like, look at a big show nitro car body. Look at an alcohol car body. You'll notice something really big missing on the back of that car, the back of that spoiler. That makes a big difference in keeping that thing from getting happy feet.
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, that it's just, I don't know. I couldn't drive one of those cars myself.
I I would love to try if I wasn't paying for anything that could potentially be damaged. You know, and I'm just talking about the simple fact that, you got to do the 2 foot shuffle to launch that thing. And again, you can't beat the sound of a screw blown alcohol engine, whether it's in the funny car or dragster, because when they're getting up on the chip, those things sound like they are ready to crack open the earth, and it's amazing.
No, you're absolutely right.
It's a different level. Speaking of different level, I have a lot of mystic powers here on the Dragzine podcast, and this time I'm going to grant you, Joe, the mystical power of budget that I have. I've got a bank account that nobody else knows about. This is going to be between you and the people watching and listening. I'm going to give you an unlimited budget and access to any builder in the world, dead or alive, whatever you want, to create the ultimate drag week vehicle. What are you going to build? Who's going to build it for you? It's that thing you dream about when you're driving down the freeway on cruise control and you start want to think about anything else than the drive you're doing. What's that car that you have built in your mind, Joe?
I would still stick with the 56 Chevy because that's what everyone knows us by. Do something out of carbon. Do a carbon car where you have a lightweight car. Jerry Bickle built the car I have now. There's no doubt I would use him. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, they build the best out there. I think, it'd definitely be boosted, be turbocharged, and, probably go to Steve Morris, see about getting one of those SMXs he's building, and do something along those lines. I mean, he's learning more and more about that motor, and it's only going to get more powerful, and then what we've learned over the years, we could either have it built or designed because there is no budget, because a lot of the stuff we put band-aids on to get us by because there isn't a product out there. But now you could, have it built.
I'm going to go one step further now. You've been on all of these drag week adventures. Drag week cars aren't full of creature comforts because race car. If you could have one creature comfort inside your drag week vehicle that you don't have or haven't been able to have, what would it be?
AC. I mean, that's our biggest thing. I mean, especially when we're down in the South or East Coast. I mean, you sweat. I mean, years ago, I didn't have my transmission covered, so the transmission was in the car with you.
Oh.
And we would check with the temperature gun, and it would be 160 degrees in the car. And when my son first started going with me, he was 13. And I thought, well, I don't want him getting sick or, from the heat. So we used to cover the transmission with welding blankets. And everyone says, oh, well, you're going to burn up the transmission and this and that. You can't do that. Well, it didn't affect the temperature one bit. And so then eventually we put a cover on, which cooled it down some. But the heat kills you. I mean, it makes it miserable to drive. I mean, everything else, the noise, the bouncing in the car, that's all doable. But the heat just gets to you.
And oh, we'll roll down a window. Oh, so we're just going to introduce hot air from the outside in the car, where it's like really not making things a whole lot better, other than the cooling effect of it on the sweat that's coming off my body.
Well, and that's it. And thank goodness my car has vent windows. So we have a set where we put the vent window at the perfect angle, and the driver's vent window cools the passenger and vice versa. So they just got to get in the right spot. But Chevrolet did it right. I mean, well, all the companies, I guess, had a vent window, because I never realized how nice that vent window is to pull the air into the car.
Yeah, and I have ridden in my fair share of performance vehicles with no AC and transmissions that get warm, even with like a full interior. And people don't realize on longer trips, you feel that heat. Like it's just like this little cruddy heater right there down by your legs, just radiating heat inside the car.
Well, and like our cars, they're two chassis pro mod basically with a body on them. Everything heat soaks from front to back, which a lot of folks don't realize. So anything that's attached to the bars, engine, transmission, well, eventually all those bars are hot. So you have to be somewhat cautious, especially the ones in the center of the car. It will burn you if you put your hand on it, and you'll forget. You go to get out of the car like the gas stop, and you go and put your hand on it, and it's burning up because, say the motor's 200 degrees or whatever it is, all those bars end up that hot, and because you're driving it for 3-4 hours. I mean, 400 miles takes us 10 to 12 hours. So when we're on a 400-mile drive, figure that car's running 10 to 12 hours.
Yeah, that's why I'm not a big fan of race cars that have a full just metal interior, because it turns it into an easy bake oven sitting in the car, and it also turns it into a griddle when you touch stuff. I learned that lesson myself at the track one time, helping a friend out, car that sat out in the sun, didn't think anything of it, touched a piece of the tin interior, and yeah, that I felt a little sizzle. Lesson learned.
No, oh yeah, and we didn't realize how hot it truly was because you're so beat from the event. But we used to go get sweet teas from McDonald's of all places, and of course it's a wax cup or styrofoam cup. And at that time we didn't have cup holders, so we'd set them. I have a belly pan that goes the whole length of the car, and we just set them down in the belly pan so they didn't spill. Well, it was right next to transmission. And it would literally melt. If there were the wax cups, it'd melt the bottom out, and then the pan would be full of the sweet tea, or the styrofoam would melt. And it wasn't like right against it. It was probably 10, 12 inches away. But you don't realize how hot after a while that it is. But it would melt the cups.
Lessons learned on the road, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, Joe, our time here is coming to an end, and I like to give my guests their opportunity to kind of be like their own inner John Force and thank all their sponsors and tell people where to find them at, and whatever else they got going on. So, Joe, I'll turn the floor over to you, and you can tell everybody what you got going on, sponsors you need to thank, and where they can learn more about your racing program. So the floor is yours, my friend.
Well, thank you. Well, right now we're doing we're doing a car for my son and wife to compete at drag and drive events. My son, we're putting it in a double frame wheel 56 Chevy. It'll be a lightweight version of mine, twin turbo, 540 cubic inch, should be a legit 650 car. So it'll be somewhat faster than mine. My wife's will be along the same lines, probably not as fast because it's all still car. And hopefully drag week and race week this year, we'll have all three cars at with any luck. As far as sponsors and people that help us, GC Coolings, like guys mentioned earlier, the fan company, make an awesome 16-volt fan. GRP connecting rods, best aluminum rod out there, best rod out there in my opinion. I mean, we've used them for 10, 12 years, great product. Jessel, if it weren't for Jessel with their quality valve train, rock arms, lifters, we couldn't do events like this, no doubt. People like Joe O from Hyperactive. I mean, he tuned the car in the very beginning. He's become a very good friend of mine over the years, and supported us, always helps us, always been there no matter what. So that's been a really good thing for us. Beyond that, controlling the boost and things like that, Turbo Smart, best weight gate out there, good product line. Carl with Roser Transmissions, you can't do one of these events without one of his transmissions, guaranteed. He builds the best transmission. And of course, you got to connect the power, so you go to Joe with Pro Torque. I mean, you can't beat it. That's the combination. I mean, if you don't do it, you'll eventually be doing it, because that's what lives. And beyond that, that's about all I have.
Well, Joe, I appreciate it. And I got to thank our sponsors for the Dragzine Podcast: Performance Distributors, Airflow Research, Procharger, MSD, Holly, Flowmaster, Moser Engineering, Comp Cams, Edelbrock, and Fast. All give us what we need to keep this podcast going. Joe, thank you so much. I will probably see you at some point on Drag Week, because I get to go this year for a couple stops. So I will come stop by and say hello and check out your rides.
Please do. Thank you very much.